In this week's Parshat Chukat, we find the story that after Aaron, the high priest, passes away, temporarily the clouds of glory that surrounded and in a certain sense protected the Jewish people disappeared. Afterwards they reappeared in the merit of Moses, but they had all the time been there in the merit of Aaron. So when he passed away, they also left. And then the Goyim that were looking, observing what was taking place within the camp of Israel, thought that the Israelites were now vulnerable, and especially that Goy who was located closest to the south of Israel, which is Amalek, the arch enemy of the Jewish people, thought that this is now an appropriate time to attack the Jewish people. So in order that the Jewish people should not identify exactly who it is, it says that he changed his language. He spoke a different, not the Amalek language, but the Canaanite language. He still dressed as an Amalek, but he spoke Canaanite in order not to know who he is. So it says that the Jewish people, before they made war, they waged war. After he did attack, and he actually took captive one maidservant, one Jewish maidservant. And then it says that the Jewish people, Vayidar Yisrael Neder Hashem, that they made a vow to God, that if you give me this people, in other words, if I am able to be victorious over this people, and they just said this people because it wasn't clear who this is, if it's Amalek or it's Canaan, so that's why they just said in general, if you give me this people into my hands, then I will dedicate all of their cities to God. And so it was. It says, Vayishma Hashem Kol Yisrael, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu listened to the voice of Israel and took heed and accepted the prayer of Israel, and he gave the Amalek people, they were the Amalek people, into the hands of Israel, and the people were destroyed, as the mitzvah in the Torah to destroy, to actually kill the people, and all of the possessions in the cities were all dedicated to given to God, meaning given to the temple. So those are the verses that reads this story that appears in this week's Torah reading Chukat. The phrase of making a vow to Hashem, that if you do this for me, I promise, and I actually make a vow. A vow is a very solemn act. It's a very, very strong act, the power that the Jew has in his mouth to make a vow, a neder. That phrase, Vayidar Neder, that he made a vow, that actually in the whole Bible appears 3 times. The first time is Jacob, our father Jacob, the choice of the 3 patriarchs, that when he was on his way to Haran to find his beshert and to build his home, so he made a vow, Vayidar Yaakov Neder, because after he had his dream and he saw the ladder reaching up to heaven, he made a vow and he said, if you will protect me, I am now going to a very precarious and dangerous way. If you will be at my side and protect me and give me to eat and give me clothing, then I will return in peace to my land, the land of Israel, and this stone that is here, I will make it into a temple, and everything that you give me, I will give the tithes to you. So was the vow. So what does a vow mean? It means that I'm now in a dangerous situation. And one of the things that a Jew does when he's in a dangerous situation, he makes a neder, he makes a vow that if you'll help me, and if you'll be with me, and if you'll give me victory in my battle, so then I will do such and such for you. So the first time this appears is in reference to Yaakov, Vayidar Yaakov Neder. The second time is in this story, in Parshat Chukat, Vayidar Yisrael Neder Hashem. The first says Yaakov, actually Yisrael, which is the name of the whole people of Israel, is also the proper name of Jacob. So the first time is Vayidar Yaakov Neder. The second time is Vayidar Yisrael Neder. And the third time appears only in the book of Judges. Later on in the Bible, Vayidar Yiftach Neder, that Yiftach, one of the judges, was also about to wage war with the enemies of Israel. And he made a vow that if you'll give me the enemies, that sounds just like the second time, if you'll give the enemies into my hands, then the first thing, when I return home in peace, the first thing that will come out of my door of my home, I will offer it as sacrifice to you. What was the first thing? His daughter. So this was one of the most tragic stories in the whole Bible. So we see a very, very interesting sequence here. That actually this sequence is a sequence of degeneration of making a vow in a serious, dangerous situation to give something to God, that the first time is the highest level, actually, the level that Jacob himself says, that Yaakov says, that the vow is that if you'll be at my side, it's not explicit war, but it's similar to war, because he's going to a dangerous place spiritually. If you will be with me and give me whatever I need, both physically, first and foremost, they actually physically ask for. Then when I return in peace, I will make a temple for you, and I will give all of my tithes to you. It's dedicate everything that I possess to you. Then comes the story in our week's Torah reading, that Israel says, I have to fight here. First of all, the reason for fighting is because they took captive one little girl from Israel. And now I'm going to go to war, the whole people, because of that one little girl. It's something which is very, very important for us to learn in our generation, that one little girl that the non-Jew takes away from the Jewish community is a sufficient and over-sufficient rationale that the whole Jewish people goes to war. And going to war, they make a vow, Vayidar Yishon Neder, such and such, and Hashem listens. The verse says, makes a very important point, that Hashem listens and hears and takes the prayer to call Yisrael, the voice of Israel. This is a holy voice of Israel, the vow. And actually, they performed it. But then, later on in the Bible, in the case of Yiftach, it degenerated. Also, because of the vow, God gave him the victory in war. But then to fulfill the vow, this very, very tragic situation arose that he didn't take into mind what could possibly evolve from his vow. And his daughter was the one that left, that first went out of the door of his home when he returned in peace. So the first thing we learn from this is don't make vows, even if they're good vows, because we see that the concept of making vows to God is very powerful, but it itself is very dangerous. And that's why we're taught that make all of your decisions and promises in your heart, but do not necessarily have to express it in words as an actual vow. So this is a very clear teaching that we learn from these three times, that it says Vayidar Neder, that someone made a vow. Now let's conclude with a very important gematria. The phrase is always Vayidar Neder. And that phrase, Vayidar Neder, the first time it says Vayidar Yaakov Neder, the second time it says Vayidar Yisrael Neder, and the third time it says Vayidar Yiftach Neder. Vayidar Neder equals Da'at. Da'at is knowledge, is connection to God. Meaning that the ability to make a vow in the optimal sense, which is the vow of Yaakov, that ability to make a vow requires a very high level of da'at. That if a person has da'at elyon, has higher, what's called a higher da'at, that above is all, that God is all, and God is the true something, and everything below is nothing, then his vow will be a true vow, will be a good vow, and the beginning will be good, and the end will also be good. If the vow is only a vow that's coming from Dat Tachton, as in the case of Yiftach, that his mentality and his consciousness is one that here below this world is the true, is the tangible reality. It's called the Yesh, and I believe in God, and I believe that God, only God can give me victory, but He's something which is ayin, which is not known, as though nothing, as we say that the reality is created something from nothing. So that dot, it's not wise to make a vow if you're at that level of dot of consciousness, of knowledge and consciousness. There's an intermediate between the two, which is called Kel Deot Havaya, an intermediate state, which is the state of the vow in this week's parasha. And that's the vow that Israel makes, and God hears, and Israel fulfills by killing all of the Amaleks, and by dedicating all of their rechush, all of the possessions, to the temple. It's at a lower level than the vow of Jacob, but it's definitely a higher level than the vow of Yiftach. Now let's say one concluding word about the word vow. The two-letter subroot of vow is dar. Neder comes from dar. Dar means to dwell below. So from this we learn that the ultimate purpose of a vow, of a good vow, is to create for God a dwelling place, to bring God down into reality. That I vow, my power of speech in making a vow is so strong that if it is really good, if it's really coming from Dat Elyon, then I bring the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu down into physical reality. And then I really do, as Yaakov says, build for him a temple. Or in the intermediate state, I dedicate all of that which I have conquered in war, I dedicate it to God. But again, if I'm not at that level of dot, then I'm not creating a dirah, just the opposite. My daughter was in the dirah. The second vow was to save a Jewish daughter. The third vow creates a situation where, chas v'shalom, God forbid, a Jewish daughter is being lost because of the vow itself. So there is much to contemplate in this degenerating sequence of the three times it says Vayidar Neder. And what we learn once more is that in order to really make a neder, you have to be at a very high level of consciousness. And the ultimate purpose of making the neder is to create a dwelling place, which is to build a temple. V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. But if you're not at that level, you can still do it, but without verbally saying a vow. You can do it in your heart. So for most of us, for almost all of us, 99%, all of our vows should just be in our hearts, because we're really not at that level of Dat Elyon, which is the level of Yaakov Avinu. So may we merit to the Dirah B'Tachtonim and all that power which is in the vow to bring down Atzmut into the Dirah B'Tachtonim should be with us, whether we can actually verbally say the vow or not necessarily have to say the vow. Just promise to God in our hearts.